Body to the Or Umbrella podcast. We are so excited today to have Brad Lodi Kane. We'll call him Lodi for simplicity's sake. A guy I grew up watching on WCW, and just a pleasured and honored guest. When people talk about pro wrestling nowadays, they think about the WWE, which back when me and Michael were growing up, it was the WWF. But in the 90s, for a time, WWF was the clear number two because WCW was number one. And Lodi was a big part of that. And you had big names and storylines like the NWO with Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Randy Savage. You had Sting doing the dark, silent character that resembled the Crow. You had the Cruiserweight division revolutionizing pro wrestling. If you watch wrestling on any channel today, you'll see hints of the Cruiserweight division, and still a couple of the originals still going, like Jericho and Mysterio. But you also had a group called Raven Splock in WCW, which I was personally a big fan of. And they kind of, they had these members pop out of nowhere. And I remember just watching TV one day, and there was this guy holding up signs with a very Billy Idol look. And I was like, man, who's this guy? And very quickly we learned his name was Lodi, and that is who we have on our show today. Thank you so much for being on our show, sir.
Of course, guys. Thank you for having me, man. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. Today, we're going to talk about a myriad of subjects. Now, like I said, the man behind the name is Brad Kane. According to your Twitter account, he is a man who loves Jesus, coffee, and naps.
In that order.
And that is definitely
man after my own heart. I love it.
He is a personal trainer, an inspirational speaker, an actor, an author, a political junkie, a father, a man of many layers and many loves. We wanted to talk about many aspects of your career and life today, but I wanted to start at the beginning. We like to start off our podcast with a silly question to kind of break the ice and get everybody thinking. The question we want to start off with today is, if you could have one member of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to be your tag team partner, who would it be and why?
Well, see, you're going to throw me off because I don't know the difference in Marvel and all the different comics, right?
So just go with any comic book character.
Man, it's got to be Batman.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be Batman. He was the coolest. I loved him. The Dark Knight Batman. I don't know if you guys know how big a comic fan Raven was back in the day. Raven read through comics all day long. And I wasn't a comic fan, but out of all the stuff he read, he would pass off the Dark Knight stuff to me, and that's the only one I would read through. But he read a plethora of other ones. But I like the Dark Knight stuff. So I would have to take the Dark Knight with me because he had lots of cool toys.
That would be fantastic. What a tag team. Lodi and Batman.
Yes.
Tag team champions right there.
It can happen. You never know.
Absolutely. Michael, you got our first regular question?
Yeah. Talk about your beginnings. Growing up, how did you become interested in both fitness and professional wrestling?
As a young kid, growing up in North Carolina, I was blessed in my mind to grow up around some of the best wrestling there ever has been in the world. I grew up watching Mid-Atlantic and NWA wrestling, so I had Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and Wahoo McDaniels and Nikita Koloff and Arn Anderson, and so the Four Horsemen, and that was my youth, and that's what I grew up watching, and that's what I grew to love. And so the things that I do now, even as far as teaching kids in my style, that's my favorite kind of wrestling. And so growing up with that, funny story, my mother would never let me watch wrestling, so I had to sneak around and watch it because she said it was too violent. And that was her argument for a while. And then when she would catch me, she's like, you can't watch that. It's not real. I'm like, wait a minute. If it's not real, she was throwing me two different things. As a kid, I was confused, but I knew I loved it. And you go off to college, and I was a bouncer in college. I got into working out, had a great personal trainer, became a competitive bodybuilder. One of my roommates in college was actually an independent guy who never really made it on TV, but worked on the weekends, and his name was Tommy Gunn. He was an indie guy in North Carolina. And so I learned a little bit from him, but once I got out of school, to my first personal training studio, had a guy come by one day and offered me an opportunity to put an ad in a program for a small local wrestling show. And one thing, our discussions led to another. And he said, my trainer needs to get in better shape. And you're in great shape. Maybe if you want to learn to wrestle, he can teach you. And it turned out to be C.W. Anderson, and C.W. trained me, and I helped him in the gym. And we've had a long, storied past ever since. That was 25 years ago this November. So it's quite a while back.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember C.W. Anderson from ECW, the New Dangerous Alliance. And not too long ago, I saw him pop up on NWA. So I think he's still going. And unless he might have recently retired, but he's still going strong. So
he just retired. Love him to death, but he retired a couple weeks ago. So, yeah.
Oh, man. So definitely a great career, and cool that you got a connection with him.
Oh, yeah.
So speaking of your training and everything like that, it said, I did a little bit of research. It said you debuted for WCW pretty quickly after you started training. Can you tell us about what training was like and how you got your foot into the door of WCW?
Yes, I can. And this is one of my greatest stories ever. And so I have to preface this with a lot of my wrestling success, I know looking back now, was all God's plan, not mine. And I'll explain that in just a second. I learned under C.W. Anderson. I trained at his wrestling school outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, a small town called Smithfield. I was in Greenville, North Carolina, because I graduated from East Carolina University, had a personal training studio there. After 2 months, C.W. put me in a match in the ring, and of course I was so green. I was yellow and blue. I was so green. And he put me in there and started doing some matches. And about a year and a half later, I formed a tag team with a guy who started training with me. We ended up being Toad, but that was his name later on, but his real name was Curtis White. And as a tag team, there weren't a lot of tag teams in the Carolinas at that point that were dressed the same, working the same, had a good look. And we actually got to the point where we were main eventing against the Rock and Roll Express and some of the older guys from TV really quick. And we had an old guy come in one night after our show, after about a year and a half, and he said, you guys are just good enough to main event armories and high schools the rest of your life if that's what you want to do. He's one of my best friends, is a trainer down in Atlanta at the power plant. His name's Pez Watley, who I grew up watching, Mid-Atlantic, NWA. And he said, if you guys want to make a real life out of this and make some money, you need to go down to WCW, and I'll call him and let him know you guys are coming down for the next tryout. And the guy turned around and walked out the door. He was in our hotel room. It was George Weingroff, a wrestler from USWA. And so, Kurt and I were like, why not? Let's give it a try. And we went down about 3 weeks later for the tryout. And our tryout, you've seen the old power plant tryouts with Sarge running them, guys throwing up and guys passing out. And we started with 27 guys. And Kurt, my partner, quit the second day. And at the end of the third day, there were 3 guys left. And it was me, another guy was about 6'6", and the guy was about 5'7". And they offered the 6'6" guy, they're like, hey, you made it through. We'd like for you to come back, pay $5,000. You can go to our school. Brad, you made it through our tryout. You pay $5,000, come back to our school. They looked at the guy who was 5'7" and said, hey, man, you made it through our tryout. You're too short. We can't use you. And the kid's like, like, no, you don't get your money back. And I was like, ow. But, I had a personal training gym back in Greenville, and I packed up my stuff that weekend and moved to Atlanta the next week. And so I started training at the power plant under the tutelage of Mike Winter and Buddy Lee Parker was Sarge, and Pez was a trainer there. And about 3 months after being there and working hard, I really threw everything I had into this. I mean, I left a business in Greenville, North Carolina to go chase this dream of wrestling. And we were in a bar one night, and Johnny Attitude was a friend of mine who was at the power plant, who passed away last summer. And we were hanging out, and Raven walked in the bar. He'd just come down from ECW. So go to World Championship Wrestling. And Johnny's like, I'm going to go talk to Raven. Come on over. I'm like, I don't know him. I don't want to bug him. I'm out. And so Johnny goes and talks to him, and he comes back about 10 minutes later. He goes, hey, man, Raven needs to talk to you. Why does Raven need to talk to me? I don't know the guy. And he said, no, he wants to meet you because he knows, you're a competitive bodybuilder or a personal trainer, and he's looking for a personal trainer. And I go over, and here we are at midnight in a bar, and Raven questions me for like 10, 15 minutes, kind of drilling me on these fitness questions. And he looks at me and goes, all right, you're hired. Here's my address. Pick me up tomorrow, and we'll go to the gym. All right, whatever. And so 2 or 3 weeks later after training him, he asked me would I be willing to be his personal assistant. I'm like, well, what all does that entail? And he said, well, look, when I'm out of town, I pick up my dry cleaning, check my mail. You know, when I'm in town, we'll hang out, whatever. And so sure enough, about 3 weeks later, I became his personal assistant. And we were sitting together one night. It's one of the craziest stories, I think, of my entire wrestling career. We were at a bar, and it was about 11:30 or 12 o'clock. And I had done some work as Brad Kane for WCW down at the WCW Pro. We would do down in Florida every 3 months. We'd go down to Orlando and tape down there at Universal for the Saturday morning show. Remember when the ring used to spin on that Saturday morning show? If you guys listen, we would tape 3 months of TV at once. And so one of the craziest things that happened, I'd gone down there and wrestled as Brad Kane with purple trunks, purple knee pads, short dark hair. And it just so happened, Raven calls Terry Taylor on a Thursday night. He goes, hey, you know Brad Kane down at the power plant, can I put him in the flock on Monday night at Nitro? And I'm catching Raven's into the phone call, and Raven's like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Okay, we'll do it. See you. He puts the phone down. He goes, hey, buy yourself a ticket to Detroit. We got a pay-per-view. We have to fly out for Saturday morning. And so this is Thursday night at midnight, right? So I'm looking at 36 hours before I need to fly out. And he goes, hey, we got to do something about you, kid. You don't look like a star. He said, let's make you Billy Idol. He said, go get you some motorcycle boots, get you some black leather pants, get you to change the gloves, definitely dye your hair. So in about a 36-hour span, I go from just the dark hair look of being your all-American boy on my character that I had before into being Lodi. So the funny thing, that Saturday morning, the WCW show aired, my character, Brad Kane, wrestling Barry Horowitz in purple trunks and purple knee pads.
Wow.
A lot of people don't know this. The very next night, I was at the pay-per-view where Raven blinded Scotty Riggs, ringside as Lodi in the black pants and blonde hair. So you talk about 2 days back-to-back and playing two entirely different characters. I don't know that's been done very often.
I don't think so. I think that's a pretty unique situation for sure.
So that's one of those stories, and you say, how, why did God have a plan in that? There was no reason for me in 2 years to go from breaking in the business to being in front of 18,000 people at Auburn Hills at the Palace. Most guys like Perry Saturn, the guys in the flock, some of those guys have worked 10, 12, 15 years all over the world to make it to that point. And Nikita Koloff and I are good friends. We do some ministry work together, and he and I both talk about we feel like God used wrestling for us to give us a platform, not only to be comfortable in front of people, but to go out and do what we do now when we go out and spread the gospel. Because he said it's kind of the same thing. We get in an airplane, we fly somewhere, we get a rental car, we go speak to people we've never met before, we get to the hotel, we come back home. It's just like wrestling. We're just, instead of wrestling and performing, we're going out and spreading the gospel, but we're comfortable doing it because we've done it our whole lives.
That's amazing.
Wow, that's a great transition and a great point about because I mean, me and my brother have both been preaching for years and years and years, and that speaking is it's a hard thing sometimes. It takes a long time to get out of your comfort zone, and for you and for Nikita as well, that training ground being wrestling is such a crazy thing to think about, because most people say, oh well, the pinnacle of your success is WCW and Raven's flock, but obviously, you're like, okay, well, this prepared me for something bigger and something more important. So that's incredible. Michael, you got the next question?
Yeah. First of all, what a crazy story. Like, just suddenly, you're on one of the biggest stages in the world, just suddenly.
Yes. Bam.
Bang. So when you debuted for WCW, and I think this goes along with what you're saying, do you feel like you were mentally and emotionally ready for this?
That's a great question, and I mean that wholeheartedly. It's not one people don't realize about the mental and emotional aspect of it. Raven caught me really early because obviously he was a big star already and had been through this. And he and I we found out later on, we butted heads a lot over, hey, the sky's kind of pale blue. No, it's light blue. That would turn into a 3-day argument for us. And it took some of our friends later on to realize, when we talked to them, I'm like, man, he drives me crazy. He's like, you know why you guys get on each other's nerves? You're carbon copies of each other. You're like the same person. We're like, oh my goodness, I'm not like him. And he's like, man, I'm not like him. And I'll never forget, we're driving somewhere one day. I'm driving Raven around in his convertible. And he's like, I'm like, what do you get me for my birthday, kid? I'm like, what do you get me for my birthday? He's like, well, mine's next week, so you need to get on. I'm like, mine's next week. We have the same birthday.
Oh, wow.
Both of them September 8th. It took us about 9 months to figure that out. So that's a funny story when we go there. And so it took us a while to realize the point. Maybe we do butt heads a lot because we're very similar. But again, I can't sit here. I could talk for 4 hours and not express how much he helped me and how much he gave to me and how much he taught me and gave me so many big breaks in my life. But to go back to the mental and emotional aspect of it, you want to think you're ready. You know, in my mind, like, I've been doing this 2 years. I know what I'm doing. Again, I was still green as grass. In my mind, I thought I'd earned my spot. And in hindsight, looking back, that was a ridiculous jump from taking a bump, and 2 years later, I'm on a pay-per-view in front of 18,000 people live. I'm not counting how many millions at home. And so when people start to know you and you go out and everybody goes, there's Lodi, and you can't walk by. Like, so when I was a kid, you go to the grocery store, mom's shopping, I'm looking at wrestling magazines. That was just what I did while mom shopped, right? You can't pick up a wrestling magazine and not see the Flock in it. We're all over TV. We're on every wrestling show. I was a guest VJ on MTV and VH1.
Wow.
You get those kind of things, and all of a sudden, and Raven taught me this early, the push always goes to your head. So while you want to take credit for it, you don't realize that somebody put you there. And again, in hindsight, I know that was a good Lord pushing me somewhere I really didn't belong because I didn't know what I was doing, you know. And but I was surrounded by some great guys who helped me somewhat maintain some semblance of reality before I ran off the rails on my own.
Absolutely. And it's so important to have those mentors in your life who are willing to invest in you and are willing to be patient with you as that investment begins to pay off, for sure. Next question I have, the Flock was such a unique group. You had the high flyer who was perpetually itchy in Kidman. You had the loyal best friend with endless talent in Saturn. You had the giant in the over 7 feet tall Reese. You had the young prospect with all the intriguing name and Sick Boy. I'd never seen a wrestler with such quite a name as Sick Boy before. You had the tortured. Go ahead, sorry.
You know, all the characters came from Train Spotting. Raven picked them all out from there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you had the tortured soul nephew of Hulk Hogan and Horace. You had the former Rock and Roll Van Hammer. You had the disciple who came up to follow Raven after Raven beat his eyeball out in the rigs you talked about earlier. And you had Raven, who was the leader of the Flock and the grunge icon who came from ECW and had his group there and everything like that. Where did your character fit in with this bunch, and what was the Lodi character all about?
That was easy. You know, Raven made me the flunky of the group. And so I took Stevie Richards' place, basically, because Stevie had just left in September and with his neck injuries. And so I didn't see it at the time and didn't realize it. In hindsight, again, everything's so much clearer. You know, I was the cannon fodder, and I was the comedy relief. I was the Johnny Polo, Raven's old character from WWF. All he did was hack the stuff that worked for Johnny Polo and put it on me. And had I done 100% of what Raven asked me to do, I feel like my character would have been over even better than it was. Because I would argue with him on some things, and I would put my foot down on some things, but about 80% of the things I would buy into. Again, hindsight tells me he was right all the time, because Raven sees wrestling characters like most people see tic-tac-toe. He just lays it out, and the stuff he does and says works. And that's what his Flock needed. We were all supposed to be individuals. Raven had great characters drawn out for every single one of us. Kidman got over because he bought into the gimmick. Lodi got over because he bought into the gimmick. I feel like some of the other guys thought they knew a little better than Raven, or thought they could do it a little better than Raven, and wanted to be the cool guy like Raven, and they just kind of blended in as opposed to standing out, which if everybody would have done their part and stood out, I think we would have been even a more remarkable group.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to ask a little bit of a further question with the signs. You were known as the sign. I can't remember if you were before or after Sign Guy Dudley in ECW.
I was after Louis. He did it first. But Raven gave that to him at ECW.
Okay.
So, and in Louis' defense, he always told me, he's like, I did it first. You did it in a bigger market and got it over. You win. So, you know, it was one of those things.
And how did you come up with the signs each week? Was that a Raven idea as well, or did you come up with your own things, or was it somebody else feeding you the stuff? Like, how did the week to week sign
in
go?
the very beginning, Raven would give me an idea or two. And Raven had a warped sense of humor, and it got to the point where 50% of the things Raven gave me, I would look at him like, I could never put that on TV. We're not going to get, you know. So I would kibosh some of the more ridiculous off the wall stuff. But he would give me some good ideas. Because again, Raven's got a smart mind. He started allowing me some more freedom. Oddly enough, a lot of the guys in the back would give me some ideas. That some would be like, okay, that's terrible. I would never use that. And some would come up, I'm like, I have to use that. You know, Dean Malenko probably gave me more good sign ideas than anybody outside the flock, which most people find funny. They're like, Dean Malenko. And if you don't know Dean and you've only seen him wrestle and you see the Iceman character and the stuff with no emotion or no, you probably don't realize he's one of the funniest guys in the world. Mm-hmm. He has this dry sense of humor and will never crack a smile. But I'd be in the hallway, you know, writing out signs, and he'd walk up behind me, just whisper in my ear and keep walking. And he would be like 10 steps away, and I would look at him, and I'm just dying in tears because it would be perfect for what we were doing. And he was great at that. So I always have to throw his name out there because people are like, Dean Malenko. I'm like, yeah, that's funny. But he gave me some great ideas.
One of my favorites of all time, by the way.
Like, Michael loved Dean. That was Michael's guy. Dean Malenko was Michael's guy. And I listened to he did a podcast recently with Jim Ross and I think Aubrey Edwards is the referee from AEW. Yeah. And I was shocked because I'd never heard him in a podcast or anything like that before. And I'm like, man, this dude's like the funniest guy.
He is a funny guy.
Michael, what's your next question?
Transitioning, you know, we talked a lot about the flock, but what are some of your most memorable and favorite moments when you were part of the flock? What really sticks out to you?
One thing that I teach all my kids in my wrestling school that I think is imperative for them to learn, because wrestling has changed a lot in 22 years. People always ask, one question that I get is, what's your favorite match? And people always expect me to come up with something that I've actually done or a match of mine. But my favorite match to be a part of, and if you guys don't remember this, you got the network, check it out for me, and I promise it's worth your watch, was when Raven faced Saturn at Fall Brawl in 1998 to free the flock. Yep. For me, a lot of personal stuff, it was the end of the flock because Saturn wins. It happened in Winston-Salem. I'm from Asheboro, North Carolina. My whole family, both sides were there. I had, you know, people from my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family, a lot of friends and family there. And I thought the way that match was put together with me at ringside and Kenyon handcuffed at ringside and the flock coming down, if you don't remember it, go back and watch it. And once they start to go home, every false finish that Raven and Saturn hit, the fans came up out of their seats. You just don't get that anymore. You might get a polite golf clap. It does not happen on the big pay-per-view shows anymore. You don't get that kind of enthusiasm. And it went both ways. If Raven had Perry pinned and Perry kicked out, they came up. If it was the other way around, Raven kicked out, they came up. It was just, they set it up. And there were so many swerves, I think, in that. And, of course, if you forgot, that's one of the times Perry Saturn put me through a table with a DVD off the apron. And that was a pretty crazy bump. But that's in there at the end. But that match, just the way it was built up from a 2-year end of a feud, something that was really drawn out and not Crash TV where we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, all in the same episode. You know, I don't like that. I like the more drawn out, slow. I like some storylines. I like there to be a reason for me to watch. I don't like two guys who at the beginning of the show get thrown together as a tag team. They go out and win the tag team belts. By the middle of the show, they're mad at each other. At the end of the show, they're fighting to get away from each other. It's just too much in one night, you know, and that slow build and the long-term thing for me, I think just has a lot more meaning behind it when you have something like that. So I have a hard time finding anything from a wrestling standpoint that I've done that was bigger than that match with it having so much meaning. The relationships through wrestling, you know, I'm sure you guys have heard over and over again, when you're a wrestler and on the road 25 days a month, you spend more time with the boys than your family
Yeah.
or your wife, your girlfriend, or anybody else. And you become so much like brothers. And I've had so many great relationships. We just taped a pay-per-view a couple weeks ago in Jackson, Georgia. I'm sure you guys might have heard about this. Talking Shop-O-Mania.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the pay-per-view is Saturday night, excuse me. Saturday night on Fight TV at 9 o'clock, August 1st. And you talk about stars, but now listen, this is for a very adult audience. This is not a PG show.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me on that. It is not a PG show. But the stars and the people that are there and some of the entertainment value, the Flock makes an appearance. You've got me and Sick Boy and Reese. And so anytime you got the Flock getting back together, it's worth the cost of a pay-per-view. But we had a blast, so that was a lot of fun. And the fact that I still see some of these guys at conventions. Lenny and I got together. We'll get into the West Hollywood Blonde stuff, I'm sure. But, you know, he was as close to me as a brother, and we get together for WrestleCade last year, spent a weekend together. So that kind of stuff, the relationships that you have with the men outside of the ring and spending time together, that's something you just can't put a price tag on.
Absolutely. You know, we're going to talk more about the pay-per-view because we want to make sure and promote that. I've been looking forward to that and looking at it. And of course, it's the Good Brothers, Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows are the ones who I see you laughing there. You know,
love those guys. I've known Drew for a long time, but I haven't known Carl. And I met Carl for the first time at the taping. And there are guys today that I'm fans of. I mean, I'm a wrestling fan as well as I love the business. And I wanted to express to him how much I enjoyed his work. And he's like, Lodi, I'm so glad to meet you. You know, a big fan of yours since I was a kid. I'm like, ow. You don't want to think about it. And so I'm like, can you hurt me any worse there, kid? And he's like, well, when did the Flock break up? And I was like, 98. I think he said he was 8 years old. He's like, bro, come on, or 9. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Drop it. I'm old. I get it. But good time and hanging out with those guys and doing that stuff. I think if you're just looking for something to take your mind off COVID and shutdowns and wearing a mask and all that good stuff, it can be a funny time. That pay-per-view is going to bring you some smiles if nothing else.
Absolutely. I remember. I'm struggling with the name, but they did that Southpaw Regional Wrestling. That series just hit the internet and went ablaze. And these guys recently came back into Impact. And hey, I mean, they were in the main event of WrestleMania this year with the Boneyard match. And I think there's a similar, more adult themed match that they're going to do. I've heard about that has a little bit to do with the Boneyard, but we'll get back to that in a second. I wanted to ask, WCW was full of huge names from the 80s who were still going strong. And you mentioned growing up in the Carolinas watching the NWA stuff and things like that. What was it like being peers with guys who had been famous for so long? And who are some of the guys you met that were just far different than you saw on TV, the good experiences?
For me, being a fan, growing up and watching these guys, I jokingly tell people if they don't understand some of the wrestlers' names, I'm like, it was basically like an adult fantasy camp. You can't grow up being a wrestling fan and all of a sudden you're on TV and you're, as you said, being peers and working with Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and Sting and Dusty Rhodes. It's just name after name after name after name. And so, that was a little bit intimidating at first. It was, you try to be cool and feel like, okay, I belong here, but you're looking around and you're like, wow, I'm here. And so for the most part, overall and overwhelmingly, the guys were much better in person than you could have thought they would be, to me anyway. I had great relationships with the guys. As you stuck around longer and all of a sudden you realize there was money involved and then people who were getting more TV time, Lenny and Lodi, then certain big names, I'm not going to say who they were, they start to get about that because, but the good thing that we had going for us, and same thing with the Flock, we had the quarter-hour ratings. The Nielsen, so you knew what your quarter-hour drew. You knew if you were doing well or you were not. And there was a time when Lenny and Lodi and the West Hollywood Blondes were drawing nothing lower than a 4.5 and a quarter hour, and Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff were drawing 1/8 and 1/7.
Wow.
That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Our whole show at the time was doing like 2 3s and 2 4s, but Lenny and Lodi, our quarter hours were 4 5s and higher.
Wow.
So, that was just that's just truth. But some of the guys, it was amazing how many of the guys had college degrees that you wouldn't expect. One funny story on an indie show one time, because I had never worked with him up top because he was always a WWF guy. I go to an indie show. I think Lenny and I were working maybe 2004, 2005. We get there kind of early, and Kamala, early afternoon is already his gimmick. And he's sitting in a chair with his legs crossed. He's got some readers on, and he's reading the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. I did not. The first time I met Kamala, he's sitting, like I said, he's wearing glasses and reading the Wall Street Journal, and you're like, C.W. Anderson came up with this term we use a lot called OIW, only in wrestling. Perfect example of OIW, only in wrestling. That phrase covers a lot of things. I think it's going to cover everything you see Saturday night, by the way, at that pay-per-view. Only in wrestling. Nowhere else in the world would you see this happen or be able to get over or be done. But you feel free to steal that phrase, because there's some things we do that nowhere else would happen.
Exactly. Michael, you got the next question?
Yeah. So you just mentioned it. You're setting these questions up so well. So good job doing that. But after the Flock, you had a very memorable tag team with Lenny Lane. So
yes, sir.
Can you tell us a little bit about that time with that particular tag team and some of the triumphs and the challenges that went with it?
I did not know Lenny very well before this whole angle started. He actually came up to me one day. This was after the Flock was over. I'm pretty much at this point, without Raven and without the Flock, on my own and doing the Saturday night tapings, basically the WCW Saturday night show, the mothership, as Dusty would call it. And that was pretty much, I do a Nitro spot here or there, but nothing big. And Lenny approached me one time, who at that time had just been used to do enhancement stuff. And he said, "Hey, what are they doing with you?" And I'm like, "Nothing really. I'm kind of struggling here." He goes, "Man, we should form a tag team." I looked at him. I'm like, I kid you not. My answer was, "What are we going to be? Lenny and Lodi, the losers?" I mean, what do? You don't take two guys at the bottom of the heap or, at the bottom of the bed all of a sudden. What kind of tag team is that? He goes, no, I got an angle for us. I'm like, "What kind of angle?" And he goes, have you ever watched Saturday Night Live and seen like the ambiguously gay duo? He said, "I got an idea. Just hold on. He said, "I got an idea. Maybe, we're walking down the beach and you're eating ice cream and I'm eating ice cream and your ice cream drops. I'm like, hey, Lodi, have some of mine." Man, I don't know, Lenny. And so I don't know this guy, but he's pitching this to me. He's like, "Look, at the time, Kevin Nash was the booker. I was good friends with Nash." He said, "Bro, you can take this to Nash." And I said, "Listen, here's what we do. I'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll come back to do Saturday night again. If you'll type it up and write it up for me, I'll take it to him." All right. I know Lenny's not going to type this thing up. We're done, right? I show up 2 weeks later. He runs up to me in the building. "Here, Lodi." And he hands me like a 4-page essay.
Wow.
So he's like, you said you'd do it? And I'm like, okay. And I look at it before I take it to Kevin, and the first line of this proposed gimmick for Lenny and I says, "This is not a gay gimmick."
What a start.
That's the start. And I'm like, "Lenny, I don't think that's a good idea." He said, "Bro, you said to do it." I'm like, okay, let's go. Get down to Kevin's office. I walk in, "Big Kev, Lodi. Hey, man, I got an idea for you." "What you got, Lodi?" "Hey, man, we just chance. Just look over this." I kind of passed it across the desk to him. He looks at it and goes, "This is not a gay get." What? He throws it. He throws it on the desk. He goes, "What do you think? We can't do that here. Turner, get out of here, man. Go." And that was it. It was done. And so we walk out, and I'm like, "Lenny, are you happy?" He's like, "Yo." I said, "I told you it wouldn't work." It was almost like a vignette we were doing. It was real life. And so a month goes by, 2 months, maybe a month and a half goes by. I'm living out in California at the time. I was out in Marina Del Rey, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine who's really close with Kevin Nash. He said, "You're going to get a phone call in about 5 minutes. You didn't hear it from me. they're going to run with the Lenny and Lodi thing. I'm like, what? The phone goes dead. Click. Whatever. So I was actually meeting with my acting agent at the time. We were at lunch. 5 minutes later, Kevin Nash calls. He goes, hey, kid, what are you doing? I'm like, having lunch with my agent. What are you doing? He goes, any chance you can make the Nitro on Monday? And I'm like, can I ask why? He said, I think we're going to run with that Lenny and Lodi gimmick. So there's the birth of it, right? And we eased into that thing. But one of the coolest things that came out of that, and I think this is what helped get us over on TV, and I think why the fans bought into what we did, Lenny and I, again, didn't know each other. And he and I became so close and intertwined life-wise. We rode together. We shared hotel rooms together. We worked out together. We ate together. We stayed together. We did everything together. And our chemistry outside the ring translated inside the ring to, it seemed like to people that we had been doing this our whole life. And so much of the stuff now, I'm not going to sit here and say we didn't plan some spots and lay stuff out. Of course we did. But there were some of the funniest things we ever did. We came up with on the fly. We just did it. And it's all of a sudden, it's like, I can't believe we just did that. And I can't believe it got over. And as the character and the gimmicks, the West Hollywood Blondes got more and more over, it was so funny because we get so rid. We walk into catering, and you got all the guys. And, you can only imagine the names and things we were called from everybody in the business. But once everybody got past the first cat calling and we got our food, Steven Regal would be like, Lodi, come here. And he would give us some ideas. Lenny, come here a minute. And Steven Regal would give us some ideas. And Kurt Hennig would give us some ideas. We had so many guys give us ideas, we had to start making a list because the guys were helping us so much. And that was pretty cool. And, for us to take that thing and run with it and have fun, I hate it got squashed the way it did by the game Lesbians Against Defamation. AOL and Time Warner didn't stand up to their crazy letter that listed all 5 things that we had done that they had a problem with. And out of the 5 they listed, none of them were true.
Mm.
Yeah.
Some people don't know that story. Do you know this?
Yeah, we've heard about it.
If you know, but the letter, they had 5 bullet points that they wanted us taken off TV for what we had done. And none of the 5 that they listed were true. They were all false. There wasn't one that, they had called one time before and got upset because Lenny and I, when we were in Atlanta, we walked out of a door that had closet written on it. We just came out of the door, man. Don't read into it. And so they said, okay, they didn't like that. So WCW says, we're a weekly episodic show. We don't, replay shows. And they said we continue to run it over and over again. That never happened. They said Lenny was announced as Lodi's gay tag team partner in every arena in the country. That was never done on TV or in an arena. They said Lenny never won. They said we never won a match. Lenny was a cruiserweight champ. How did we become a champ and not have it? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
None of it made sense. But instead of just standing up for us, AOL Time Warner said, instead of fighting the small groups, and we will take them off TV and come up with something else for them. So that was frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. And were y'all creative control after that or something?
Initially, when Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara came down, they kept throwing ideas at these guys, and they put in place these guys called standards and practices.
That's it. Yeah.
To monitor what was going on. And that was Vince Russo's joke. He would make us standards and practices, and they would make fun of that. Mm. I stormed out of the office. I'm like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
They brought us in. That was it. And Lenny ran me down. He's like, Lodi, we got to get back on TV. We can get anything over. And they gave us Stacy Keibler, and she was terrible. I like her as a person. At that point, listen, beautiful to look at, but at that time she was dumber than a box of hammers when it came to wrestling. She did not know wrestling, and they used her in our matches to set up certain scenarios, and we would tell her, when I superplex a guy off the top, that's your cue to come down. At the end of the match, just set up to go home. I would body slam a guy in the first 30 seconds, she'd walk out. What are you doing? Wasn't that the superplex thing? No! Superplex thing. Who are you? So that got frustrating. There was an episode where Kevin Sullivan came to us later on when he was back in charge. He goes like, "Why are you guys wearing the suits and what are you doing? And why? And like, can we get rid of Stacy?" And he goes, "Yes, go back to wrestling." And so there's actually a segment where we fire her, and that was almost a shoot. That was pretty legit. Well, us getting rid of her.
Oh man!
Of course, we know she went on to do greater, more monstrous and great things with WWE and in the whole entertainment world. And I wish her the best. I don't hold anything against her, but at the time, she really was a detriment to us just because she messed up so many of our matches.
Mm. You know, it's it was a great gimmick, and I remember it getting cut off, and man, but you know, it's God has a way of doing crazy things, and I wanted to talk to you about more aspects of your life. Looking at your social media, we see a great focus on spreading joy through scripture and talking about your walk with Christ. At what point in your life did your faith really start to become important? And tell us about your journey to becoming a devoted follower and speaker for Christ.
Absolutely. You know, I was raised by two wonderful parents who, and I say this over and over and over again, we had an open door policy at church. If the church doors were open, we were there. You know, we went Sunday morning, we went Sunday night, we went Wednesday night, we went Saturday night for potluck dinners, we went to vacation Bible school. If there was something going on at church, my butt was there. And sadly enough to say, through all of this, as we talk about my successes and being a VJ on MTV and VH1 and being on video games and being in magazines, I talk about all that stuff because anyone who didn't know me would probably define that as a wonderful success story. Poor kid who grew up on a farm, and all of a sudden here I am. You know, every major arena in the United States we sold out. We had 46,000 people at the Georgia Dome the night Hogan lost to Goldberg. And, you know, 10, 11 million people watching at home on TV. You know, by all worldly standards, Lodi made it. But inside, I was absolutely empty and as far away with my walk with the Lord that I've ever been in my life, and was miserable in so many ways, and chasing an addiction and addictive personality that pushed my substance abuse through the roof, and had lots of issues. And there were many nights, and I don't say this to entice people, but to explain to them how bad it was, where I knew before I fell asleep I was either going to wake up in a hospital or I wasn't waking up again. And we lost so many guys to drug overdoses and suicides, and we were so bad off ourselves. And some of the guys I spent time with, we would go to funerals high and blame the guy, you know, the drug addict, for being a bad drug addict, for killing himself. Mm-hmm. And so the last story that I think most people have heard, but over and over again, you know, we had a Deadpool list, like the next 5 guys to die at WCW. And when it would come around, like, oh, guess who made the list this week? You know, here's the list this week. It's like, if you weren't on the list, you're like, hey, what about me? I'm supposed to be on the list. And so when you're joking about dying from drug abuse, your mind took a warp turn somewhere. And I say that now with an embarrassment. When I talk to young kids today, I really have to temper the great things that the world deems successful, because I don't want that to become so attractive they ignore all the other stuff that came with it and all the downsides. And I feel like one of the reasons God kept me around was to prevent young men from taking the same path I did. Go wrestle, that's fine. Be a great wrestler, but use that for something good and don't destroy your life and those around you on the way. And so I've worked with a lot of kids with their drug habits, and I hope with my wrestling school, I share with them what I've done, and the bad, the good, the ugly, all of it. So hopefully they can avoid some of that. And so that's where I go into, 2012, I reunited with a former student of mine, Scotty Matthews, who, Team Fearless, we decided to start tagging. He and I got away from each other for a while. We did some dark matches at WWE after I broke my neck the second time back in 2004, 2005. And we kind of went our separate ways. When we got back together, both of us had gotten our lives back right and were following Christ. And we said, we could put a tag team together and call ourselves Team Fearless. And so now, Team Fearless means we're fearless to stand on any street corner and profess our love for Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And so every shirt we sell, every picture we sell, has a Bible verse on it. And so we try to take time at the shows to talk to kids, and at any show where the promoter will allow us to, we'll speak, whether it be 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes in the match, just thank God for getting us there and getting everybody home safe. And so we feel like we've taken the gift that God's given us to be able to wrestle and use that to spread the gospel and hope for the kingdom.
Absolutely. Whatever you do in word and deed, do all in the name of the Lord.
Yes,
and we
sir.
have so many, you have a unique avenue to be able to spread that message, and we all have some avenue, some way to reach some people, to help them, to give them the greatest gift that we could ever give them, and that is the gospel.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. What do we got next, Michael?
So going along with what you've been saying, if you were to tell someone the most important keys to maintaining a strong walk of faith as someone in the entertainment industry, or just generally as human beings, what would you say those would be?
I have a go-to message sometimes. I get to shows and a promoter will say, Lodi, if George South isn't there, Lodi, will you pray for us? And, I'll pray for the guys in the back. And when George is there, I always let him pray. But occasionally, the guy's like, hey, do you mind going out and saying a few words at the end of the show? Or, I speak at different events. And one of the things that really sticks with me is, and you learn it when you're a young kid in church, but it's, you keep God first, others second, yourself third. And there's so many ways to put that. Some people say Jesus first, others second, yourself third, use joy. But, I have found over and over again, even to this day, if I keep Jesus first and put others before me and myself third, everything runs really smooth in my life. But if I get that order mixed up just a little bit, it all goes haywire. And I think going back through my life, I can show people I've had some highs and I've had some really low lows. And I think I'm a carbon copy of what not to do at times. And I show them, I'm like, hey, look, when I'm following God and doing what I'm supposed to, everything's pretty good. But when I get away from him, things just don't go so well when I put me first and my own selfish desires. And that's something I fight with every day, is keeping him first and not letting what Brad wants or Lodi wants to get out in front of that. And sometimes that's difficult for me.
What a great answer.
Difficult for us too. Difficult for us too.
We're all in it together.
And back to the thing of, again, some people hear my story and they're like, you had so much, and it's like so much, but who was I making happy? I was making me happy and the world happy. I wasn't even happy. Like, how could you not be happy? You're making 6 figures a year. You had royalty checks coming in every 2 or 3 days from World Championship Wrestling. So crazy. We got paid every 2 weeks when I worked for Ted Turner. We had a steady check that came in. We had guaranteed contracts. But we got our royalty checks just randomly. So you go to the mailbox on Monday. Hey, here's a check for $800. What's this for? Oh, baseball cards. Cool. You go 2 days later. You go to the mailbox. $500. Calendar. I didn't know I was on a calendar. Cool. And you start throwing these checks. My brother was my personal assistant. He worked for me somewhere. He lived with me, and he kind of kept my stuff straight because I was never straight. He'd walk into my bedroom sometime, and he's like, bro, you've got like $37,000 in checks on your nightstand. Do we put some of these in the bank for you? Like, yeah, whatever. And it's just, it's ridiculous to think about now, the kind of money we made and stuff, but it's, it doesn't bring you happiness. If you're trying to please God, I think you're doing okay. If you're trying to please man, it's fruitless.
Absolutely. So neither one of us are in the greatest shape, me and my brother. We're trying, but it's been a struggle. Oh, look at that. Look at that muscle. It's a struggle for both of us. You seem to be in the same shape or even better shape than you were in the late 90s. Can you talk about a little bit about maybe an idiot's guide to getting in shape and maintaining discipline and forming a routine that can lead to a healthy lifestyle? I know that's a loaded question, but maybe just give us what you can here.
It's a lot, and a short-term thing here is, there are 3 things you can do to work on your body. You can start lifting some weights, you can eat better, and you can do some cardio to burn some fat off. I think it gets really hard for some people when they try to do all those things at one time. So you've got to kind of, how do you eat a rhinoceros? It's one bite at a time, You just can't try to do too much. And I think sometimes people are like, I'm going to go to the gym for 2 hours a day. I'm going to eat great. I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to stop drinking. And they just try too much, and it becomes overwhelming. And so let's just take this thing down and start smaller and move, discipline and consistency in the long-term thing is going to be a lot better for you than trying to go all out the first week and think you did wherever you are, you didn't get there in a day. You're not going to turn it around in a day. It's going to take some time. So, find a good trainer to help you if that's the case, or there are a ton of plans on, YouTube and things, whatever. Just find somebody good to follow and, start eating better because everybody's in control of what you put in your face. Watch the sugar, watch the fat, start eating clean foods. And if it's not going to make your body better, why would you eat it? That's what I tell my wrestling kids. And so one thing I've got to do, I still wrestle on the weekends when we're not having shutdowns. But also with my wrestling kids, I tell them one of the reasons I got hired at WCW in the first place was not for my wrestling ability. It was about the way I looked. It's the same thing today. If you've got a great look, you've got a leg up on everybody else who's at the same level you are. So if you really, these guys are like, I want to make it. I want to do everything I can to make it. You won't even eat right. Why you want to say you want to make it? You got to do what it takes, right? And that's part of it. So I've got to make sure I'm walking the walk when it comes to the cardio and the eating and the diet. Same thing with my relationship with God. I can't preach to somebody and then not do what I'm preaching. So you got to kind of do both. And this is the only body I got, and I've beaten it up pretty bad in the ring. I better take care of it outside the ring.
Great answer.
Absolutely. Michael, you got the next question?
Yeah. You were just mentioning the kids that you work with, teaching them wrestling, and we see you have a passion for training future generations of wrestlers. Can you tell the people how to get trained by Lodi and the mentality you have in coaching people?
Yeah, that's an easy question for me. I've got a training center. I have a personal training studio in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's actually over Matthews now. We were in Charlotte for 12 years. We have a wrestling ring here. YourFlexAppeal.com's got all the information you need there. My Twitter account's got some stuff on it too. You can find it there. But when it comes to teaching wrestlers, I've always had a passion for that since I left the power plant because I had such good guys teaching me there. But when I left there, from my time with Raven to Diamond Dallas Page to I ran Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling for Dusty Rhodes for 2 years. Sat in his office 5 days a week and also ran his wrestling school. And so you can't spend time with guys like that who are some of the best our business has ever seen and not pick up some knowledge. And for me not to share it with the young guys coming along today would be absolutely horrific. And so I feel like I've been blessed enough to be taught by some of the best ever, and I try to pass that on to them. And just, one thing we work on is not killing people. We got to be safe, but making everything look realistic. I'm not a big fan of hokey wrestling. I'm not a big fan of a lot of flips and dives and that kind of stuff. And you go back close to Lodi stuff. Lodi, I used to watch you dive. Lodi used to do. Yeah, I used to do a lot of things 20 years ago. But my body's not quite like that anymore. But, here's the thing. When it comes to entertaining people, they're still going to buy a great character with good, basic, solid wrestling. It doesn't have to be 47 dives per match to get over. And I'm just not a fan of the flips and the flops.
And that's so true. I mean, I've been watching wrestling my whole life. I'm a ridiculously big fan. And I watch, Wednesday night between AEW and NXT.
Yeah.
And there's so many flips and there's so many of the same moves. Like, I don't know how many times I'll see a suicide dive in one night. But then you look at somebody like I don't know how much you watch of the current stuff, but Timothy Thatcher, who just goes out there and he's totally different than everybody else. I mean, who's going to stand out? Somebody who does triple moonsault off the top rope, or the guy who is grinding and digging in and being different, looks different, acts different, walks different than everybody else? And to me, those are the people who really stand out.
I agree with you. If everybody's doing the same thing, be different. Be different. Take something and find it. Like my guys, and I'm so thankful for the guys I've got because, they trust me and I'm thankful for that. But they send me stuff. Hey, can we learn this? Hey, can I learn to do this? And so much of the stuff they bring me is all from the 80s and early 90s of like Mid-Atlantic and NWA before even WCW came in. Because if you go back today, and I think he's getting more credit now than he ever has in his life, and he deserves every bit of it, but Arn Anderson.
Oh yeah.
His promos and his work style works to this day. Everything he did, everything he does, if you go back and look at his promos, his facials, the story he told in the ring, the stuff he did, it still holds up. And I think with his podcast and some other things going on, he's really getting some, I think, credit that maybe he was overlooked in the past just because he was a Flair and all those other guys, you know. It's easy to kind of blend in and overlook. But if you go back and look at his stuff on his own and listen to him, he's one of the greats, man.
Absolutely. And you see teams like the Revival who just cannot stop giving tribute and praise to Arn Anderson. And, you can just see it. These guys who say, okay, well, I'm not a fan of Rey Mysterio, which there's nothing wrong with Rey Mysterio, but I'm a fan of Arn and Tully, and I'm going to imitate those guys. And, man, they're the Revival. They are just such a joy to watch, and guys like that.
Cool story about the Revival. Both those kids being out of North Carolina. I know them both. But Dash, Cash, Daniel, I've known him since he was 17. And I used to take him on the road with me all the time. I've always loved that kid. And when I was younger, going to different indie groups, if I got a chance, he had another tag partner at the time, I would always take him with me and put him on the shows, especially when he was tagging with John Skyler out of South Carolina. I drugged him to so many shows in Georgia. And I'm so proud to see somebody that I've known starting on indie show at probably 145, 150 pounds at 17 years old, finally makes some real money in the big time now. So it's great.
Absolutely. Let's see here. So you have an event coming up with, like I mentioned, the recent WrestleMania headliners who were in the Boneyard match with Undertaker and AJ Styles, and are now new Impact Wrestling signees, the Good Brothers, called Talkin' Shop Mania. Can you tell us a little bit more what to expect? We've talked about it a little bit from this event, which is coming Saturday on so many different avenues you can find that on.
Absolutely. I know Fight TV's got at 9 o'clock on Saturday night. It airs for the first time. And I think if you go through and just look at the list of names that are there, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And it's going to be unlike anything you've ever seen in wrestling before. Definitely going to be entertaining. I got to say it again. This is not a PG show. The language is not going to be very good. I don't have control of what everybody else does. I have control over what I do. My language was okay. But there's a Flock appearance. There's Dave Pinter's there from WCW. Scott D'Amore's there. Dave Pinter. If you haven't seen the promo yet, because they put some clips up online, Pinter's standing there. He's looking around and he's like, I thought Sturgis sucked. When the announcer starts out like that, it's like, that's what you're in for. And I just think it's going to be tongue-in-cheek, funny, entertaining, and just something to take your mind off, all your worries in the world right now. Just kick back and see some of these guys do some fun stuff. Rhino was there. D'Lo Brown is there. Chavo Guerrero is there. And I know some of the guys, they did some taping on one day, and I was there. And Rock and Roll Express is there. So I think the list of stars is it's going to be pretty cool when you watch it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely ordering that, and I'm excited. I just saw your name, and that was enough for me. But Johnny Swinger and the Good Brothers and all those guys, it's going to be good stuff. Michael, you got the last question.
Yeah. Finally, any parting words of encouragement or anything else you want the listeners to know about what you have in store for the future?
The whole COVID thing has thrown everybody's wrestling schedule off. I lost 17 shows this summer, canceled to COVID, and that's kind of a kick in the teeth. But, we're still here and we're still going, and I've got a show August 22nd for now in West Virginia. I don't know that North Carolina will have any shows for the rest of the year. We had a show 2 weeks ago get canceled in South Carolina. I hope we get back to wrestling soon. That's my biggest thing. I miss my weekends of not only entertaining fans, but like you guys, we talked about spreading the gospel with my brother Scotty Matthews. So I'm looking forward to getting back to doing that. Thankfully, we still got the wrestling school. My kids are coming in and working hard, and that's great for me. And just, again, if you haven't made that decision yet to follow Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, then there's no bigger decision you can make in this lifetime. And this lifetime is such a small drop in the bucket compared to eternity. You know, we get through this and we got eternity with Him. So think about that decision if you haven't yet, and you'll make the right one, I hope.
Amen. Amen. And
Yeah.
reach out to any of us. You know, if you want to learn more about that, then all of us will be happy to talk to you for sure.
Yes.
Lodi, thank you so much.
Thank you
Go
guys
ahead,
for
I'm
having
sorry.
me. No,
Absolutely.
And to back up what you said, if anybody has any questions, my Facebook, my Twitter, Instagram, shoot me a message there, and I will be glad to answer anything. I don't have a problem answering questions. So if you need to know more, I will talk.
Amen. All right. Well, Lodi, thank you so much for being on the show. We won't take up any more of your time, but remember to check out Talking Shop Mania, and we will see y'all guys later on.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, man. You take care. God bless you, okay?
God bless you guys.